So, Davy Jones, yeah, the same Davy Jones that kickstarted the universally beloved Foxy arc, might actually be Emu's devil fruit. And if Emu's been rocking it this whole time, then all that demon stuff, summoning demons, the magic book, whatever this Hellspawn transformation is, it's not magic, it's just a busted fruit power. So let me show you how the Dragon Fruit mythical model Davy Jones explains everything we've seen so far. Let's get into it. If you all want to go straight to the part explaining how the fruit came to be, feel free to skip to this time or click the 4th chapter of this video, as we need to lay down some groundwork before we get into the really fun part of the theory. So let's just start with what we've seen so far in these past chapters, with Emu demonstrating how to be a better alchemist than Edward Elric with these sacrificial, I'm gonna say transmutation since Ed's already catching strays. Every weapon from Grand Theft Auto is being yoinked into existence from a spellbook, demon ritual circles, and a complete demonic transformation, including wings, a tail, a trident, the whole 9 yards. What's interesting is the absence of an info box about said demon powers. We're left hanging. It's just pure spectacle, and it's intentional. With such an out-of-pocket showing that we've never seen from any character, it's fair to assume that maybe this isn't the work of a devil fruit, but actual, genuine magic. But here's where it gets interesting. This is not new for Oda. Whenever something looks like straight-up magic, he eventually pulls the curtain back. Brook is a classic example of someone who literally died and came back to life. Turns out he just ate the Yomi Yomi no Mi. Big Mom steals souls and brings her tea set to life. Devil fruit. Marco's healing Phoenix flames. Mythical Zoan. And Anel, who calls himself God and strikes people with lightning from the sky. He's just a Logia asshole with 10 out of 10 marketing skills. This is Oda's trick. Make the powers feel like a myth at first, and then reframe them through the logic of devil fruits. The weirdness is the point. It builds tension and mystery until the reveal. Emu's powers, by all accounts, should follow the same pattern. They're too stylized, too symbolic, too demonic not to mean something. And when Oda leans so heavily into a motif without explanation, it's not because there isn't one, it's because he's waiting to land the punchline. Zooming out, this all lines up with one of Oda's favorite tricks, using mythical lore to misdirect the reader. He stacks the scene with religious, folkish, and occult imagery, not to introduce a whole new power system, but to hit a specific emotional note. You're meant to feel the weight of it at first, and then only get the mechanics later. It's theme first, system second. A cursed book, magic circles, transforming into what brain-dead Peter Thiel might consider the Antichrist. That's not random. That's just spicy Judeo-Christian lore. Eternal damnation in the form of EA Sports microtransactions. Oda's pulling from a loaded visual playbook. So yeah, the power itself matters, but the way it's staged, that's the real show. By leaning into this demonic imagery, the story's basically telling us Emu isn't just powerful, they're primordial fear in a dunce cap. But if we go by Oda's usual playbook, this kind of theatrical setup usually points to a devil fruit tied to a cultural or emotional symbol. And in this case, it feels mythical zone coded. Not just any piece from folklore, but an idea, a fear. If this is a fruit, its animal isn't an animal planet. It's burned into cultural memory. That's the whole point of showing demons without giving us a label, to make you sit with the idea that dark magic itself might be the source of the power. And this is where the Davy Jones theory takes off, because if Oda aimed to create a devil fruit that embodied demonic legends and deep-sea terror, I mean, Emu was copying King Neptune's hardware with a trident, so this is precisely how he would do it. A mythical zone that derives from a myth so old and terrifying that it takes on the aesthetic of the devil himself, or rather the sea devil himself. The whole magic vibe is essentially a mirror of what sailors feared back in the day. Now that the stage is set and the demons are making their way downtown, the next move is obvious. Follow the fear back to where it came from, because in One Piece, fear doesn't just shape power, it spawns it. When Vegapunk said devil fruits reflect human possibility, he wasn't just talking about hopes and ideals. Elbaf gives us the flip side. Killingham's fruit taps into fear, specifically the fears of children. What he summons doesn't just come out of nowhere. They are pulled from dreams, old stories, and guilt-tripping womb landlords known as mothers. My mom's pretty great though. These demons follow patterns. They're shaped by cultural memory. And we've seen this kind of thing before. The point behind the idea of Son God Nika being encapsulated into a fruit is that people needed him to be that way. That belief created space for the fruit to take shape. Vegapunk emphasizes the idea that shared imagination, if strong enough, can shape the world around it. That's why friendship and bonds play such an integral role as a running theme within the series. It's also why I believe Ors wasn't as bad as the world made it out to be, which I'll talk about in this video here. So, where does that leave Davy Jones? He's already technically canon, mentioned during the Davy Back fight. Maybe he was real, maybe not, it doesn't really matter. If enough people feared the ocean, gave that fear a name, and told stories about it, then the groundwork's already there. Not for a naturally evolved creature, but for a mythical Zoan, one built out of generational fear. Think about it this way. In One Piece, belief isn't just an emotion, it works like an infrastructure. It shapes the world. Sometimes literally, like conviction and willpower, the things that power hockey. So when Vegapunk says devil fruits are imagined possibilities turned real, he is not just dropping philosophy, he's describing the blueprint of how the planet runs. And you know what? Mythical Zoans are the best proof. These fruits aren't based on real animals, they're based on ideas, assimilated with familiar animal features, mind you. Gods, spirits, cultural archetypes, things people believed in before they ever took shape. Sengoku's human fruit model Buddha is based on the semi-legendary Buddha. Orochi's snake fruit model Yamato no Orochi is based on the Yamato no Orochi. Gonna be more clear than that. And of course, the most important god, both in the One Piece world and in the real world, because I know some of y'all have a concerningly elaborate shrine to him, is Sun God Nika. They are all tied to how societies process the impossible. These aren't myths because they existed, they exist because people kept the myths alive. So with Davy Jones, the question shouldn't be whether he existed. If generations of sailors feared the ocean, labeled that fear, and passed it down, then that fear gains weight. Not metaphorically, but mechanically. And it would be the final form of centuries of sailors losing their shit at sea. Ghost ships, cursed storms, crews vanishing like your group chat the second you mention making actual plans. All that ocean paranoia just bundled into one name, Davy Jones. Of course, there's more to it, like how these concepts manifest as fruit that you would grow from a tree, but the idea remains intact. That aligns with how Oda has been handling fruits such as the Nika fruit. Consider them a collective consciousness of brain rot made edible. So if the Davy Jones fruit really is the product of mass fear, then the next question isn't how it works, it's what exactly the world imagined when they gave that fear a name. If the theory is right, then Imu's power isn't just some edgy demon fruit. It's a mythical Zoan based on Davy Jones, aka the ocean's ultimate bully. And everything else from the summoning circle, the spell book, the Satan transformation, they're pulled straight from the world's collective sea monster vision board. In other words, if Vegapunk's right, then let's be honest, the man built the technology that helped turn a gun into a dog, so odds are decent, then a fruit born from centuries of deep sea paranoia is totally on brand. And again, that's a pattern we've been seeing in Elbaf, where Killingham's fruit generates monsters born from children's nightmares, contributing to the series' exploration of how belief, especially fear, can manifest into real physical threats. The idea behind Imu's power is built on that exact structure. So if Davy Jones became a legend through the stories of sailors who fear dying at sea, then his image, claws, horns, tails, tridents, was never anatomically accurate, it was emotionally accurate, a reflection of what people were afraid might exist, not what they knew existed. His association with deep water, betrayal, endless drowning, and demonic wrath allowed the myth to stay consistent even as the details changed. The next part is speculative, but it builds on Oda's consistent use of dragon imagery. Across the series, dragons appear in political titles, devil fruits, and Luffy's dad, which is pretty badass to name your own son after a group you despise the fuck out of, just for claiming it for your own purposes. But anyway, what if their presence in the world of One Piece isn't just some world-building accessory? Think about it. Before the rise of the world government, hell, maybe even before the Ancient Kingdom, dragons may have been regarded as emissaries of Davy Jones, the agents of the Sea Devil himself. This perception wasn't due to their appearance, but rather to their behavior, which influenced how people interpreted dragons through a cosmological lens. Imagine a time when these creatures emerged during storms or coastal disasters. If a ship vanished at sea and a dragon was seen nearby, that image would stick. If coastal villages were destroyed and survivors described scaled monsters flying out of the mist, the pattern would grow. Over generations, these events, real or exaggerated, could shape a cultural perception. People wouldn't see dragons as neutral forces of nature. They'd see them as living omens of the abyss. Not the devil, but its messengers. However, I believe it's also important to consider how Imu was portrayed in the early stages of their presence in the series, before they revealed their demon powers in recent chapters. I think this take will be interesting for all you Mihawk fans out there, so stick with me. Oda has already planted the visual language of something else, a presence that sits in the dark and forces control without lifting a single finger and never once leaves the throne at the center of the world. That pattern builds towards an archetype that exists across cultures, the vampire, and not just any vampire, but the Dracula type, the drama king or queen lurking in the shadows, pulling strings like it's the Real Housewives of whatever the fuck, too edgy to mingle with the commoners, who commands others through contracts using biting for Dracula, and the diabolical covenant for Emu, who wins hearts and minds, not with charm, but through control and obedience. So check this out. The name Dracula itself derives from Dracul, meaning dragon, a title once held by Vlad II of I'm not even gonna try. As a member of the Order of the Dragon. In other words, the most iconic vampire in Western mythology is linguistically and historically tied to the idea of dragons. And if Oda is tying dragons to demonic fear, the link to vampires isn't a stretch. So for all of you who think there's a connection between Emu and Mihawk, do what you will with this information. Cook with all the propane and propane accessories to your heart's content. As long as you like the video, and if you're enjoying the theory so far, subscribe to the channel and click the notification bell. And also check out these Emu Dragon theories by Kusaland Theories and Dawn Dusk. They were made way before I brought this up. On top of that, there are also biblical interpretations of Satan, aka the devil, being a dragon. I mean, what are we talking about in this video? The closest thing to Satan next to Diarrhea Dookie Man who got demoted and yet who Luffy has yet to be. Okay. In that context, the horns, the wings, the serpent features of the dragons, along with their inspiration contributing to the lore of vampires, were not feared because they were unnatural. They were feared because they represented something worse. And if Davy Jones is the conceptual root behind that fear, then these dragons helped give form to it, reinforcing the myth through repeated trauma until the idea itself became something tangible, like, say, a devil fruit. We've seen this process before in the Skypiea arc, actually, with the Great Kashigami. In the Shandian culture 400 years ago, the Kashigami was a giant snake worshipped as a god. In fact, it was viewed as the representative of the god of the sun, rain, forest, and earth. Not because it created life or offered wisdom of any sort, but because it was really fucking scary. People feared its wrath, so they created rituals around it. Sacrifices were made to prevent bad luck, much like the tree fever plague. That cycle, fear leading to belief, belief leading to reverence, is the same engine that, for all intents and purposes, spawns a mythical zone. So that's the through line. Whether it's the Kashigami in the clouds or the legend of Davy Jones at sea, the mechanism is the same. A flying nightmare that inspires you to pee your pants. That terror gets ritualized and then mythologized, and eventually someone somewhere is born into a world where the symbol is more real than the source. So if dragons functioned as emissaries of the deep, or perhaps from the skies above the seas, and the Kashigami became a divine symbol of destruction, then it stands to reason that Emu, a figure shrouded in secrecy, myth, and theater, would draw upon that same pattern. Meaning Emu's powers and transformation aren't arbitrary, it mirrors the architecture of a deeply embedded legend. Each aspect of their powers and abilities is a visual shorthand for what people used to believe ruled the abyss of the ocean. As long as the boogeyman is still running space in people's heads and generational trauma keeps paying the bills, that story isn't going anywhere. Just like this mega theory about Elbaf's biggest boogeyman, Big Mom, which you can watch right now.
I'm aiming the album to fall off. It's pretty ironic, 'cause it ain't no falling for me.